Well, we know they got power here, right? Exactly.
So since you left the Indians in New York, you found a spot that you haven't worked in a while.
I guess
So
not.
it's yours.
I'm gonna get off here. I talked to my guy. I bet they're alive together. Not too bad. We're over in that area.
So did you know they didn't want to accommodation?
She felt bad. They must have been putting on these big garments that you get clothed in.
Because they're busy.
So,
That's what I thought. But I think that
hi,
Johnson,
how are you doing? How are you?
you should probably go back there.
Oh my God, I should have seen you. I should have seen you right away. I didn't see you. Absolutely. I just called.
Yeah, you're still here.
How are you? Good to see you. I didn't see you coming in. Good to see you. We're saving energy. If you want to read the agenda, you get your phone out first. I'm not turning the lights on. Apparently, Randy's in a boat out to read the agenda. Well, you know, yeah, I am, but I liked it. I really did. It was fun. But there's a time for food, huh? You know.
Yeah, like more than full time usually. What
Well,
concerns me most about that project, but then in later years I called, so there's
steak. What is that? 50 a week got her salary cut in half. Okay.
yeah, no, they had to approve like a slash in something.
Oh, got the power guy. The power man. Way to go.
He's the one who had approved
We'll call that good for a minute.
Way to go. We're sure proud of your power department.
That's intermittent.
You must need some money tonight.
We wonder if yes, in personnel.
That's exactly right.
Keep them straight. I think we should replace the propane.
I know. Exactly. I, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Could name a couple right there. How was your hard duty job? Everything good? Buddy, how are you? I thought you had. Wow. You're fine. You're fine. I got a valve replaced and put some other things in. Yeah. Yeah, dude. Yeah. Well, I know I've had a valve replaced. I went back to that was gradually just closing off. I had a murmur. So I knew that I was going to have to replace the center point. And it is very important because the body withstanding surgery. Every Saturday, I went in and broke it. He says, not only is your valve flat, but what's that? Look at this. He showed me his watch. Ken Johnson. Ken Johnson. Ken Johnson. I like him. He was funny. He was funny. He's a character. He's a character, man.
Who's taking on the whole freaking table? Chad.
Here, can I store my plug over here?
Sweet affair.
Thanks for the offer. Where's the extension on the board?
Do you want to switch with Tyson?
It's up to you guys.
I don't.
I'm gonna get up in the night. Maybe that's easier.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah, I'm gonna plug it too, but mine reaches.
Yes. As a matter of fact, great. Yeah. It's been a blessing.
Oh, you should have. For the whole agenda? No. No, I mean, sorry, for the whole item.
Okay.
23 years, that's too long to just tolerate.
Luckily, you didn't pinch it off.
Okay. How are you?
Don't touch me.
I'm not sick. I got the thing down the wrong throat. No, down the wrong throat.
Place violence.
Yes, right. Don't tell jokes. Don't touch.
I've been there for you for a while now.
I mean, they're getting pretty strict.
Apologize.
It's okay.
That was later than expected.
Got your message.
Hello, this is the Bountiful City Council meeting, Tuesday, January 23rd, 2018. We did have a work session at 6:30. That's often at 6 o'clock before these meetings in the planning room. But this is our regular session at 7 p.m. and we have a full house here of all the council people, and we appreciate those who have come to maybe speak in the public hearing today, and we'll also hear from some probably in the public comment. We'll talk about that in a few moments. So thanks, council, for everyone being here, and it's good to be together. And really, I guess the full meeting for the first time with Chris Simonson. So we're glad that you're with us, Chris.
Thank you.
We'll start by having a Pledge of Allegiance, and we'll ask Chase Moulton if he'd come up here and lead us he's our scout, and he's going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please stand. Put your right hand over your heart. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Chase. We've asked Matthew Willey, who's the president of the Stone Creek Stake here in Bountiful, if he would offer a prayer. Please, President.
Our Father in heaven, we're grateful for this evening. We're grateful for the freedoms that we enjoy, the freedom we have to gather and to discuss things. We're grateful for the servicemen and servicewomen, and they're sacrificing so much on our behalf. We ask you to watch over them and help us to be mindful of them and be appreciative of the many freedoms that we enjoy. We ask thee this evening that thou might bless us with a spirit of unity and harmony, and also the ability to discuss and to resolve concerns. We might use those gifts that we've been given to help all our community, that we might find happiness as we associate with each other. We are grateful once again for the many blessings that we enjoy, and ask that we might continue to enjoy those blessings We also ask a blessing upon those that lead us, that they might have a spirit of knowledge and ability like our founding fathers, that we might be able to understand what needs to be done, and that we might be more united as the citizens in this country. And we say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, President Willie, for being here. It is time now for our comment period, our public comment period, and this can last up to 10 minutes, but with each person just 2 minutes, and you'll see this on the little monitor in front of me. You're welcome to come up and state your name. Now, we do have a public hearing tonight about downtown, and if you come to comment during that public hearing, you probably won't need to make a comment twice. So if you have a comment that you would like to make, you're welcome to come forward.
I'm Ethel Black. I live at 205 North, 100 East in Bountiful. Thank you for allowing us to have this public comment in order to be able to ask questions that we don't know who to go to otherwise. I'm here representing some citizens that have come to me and said, how can we get Bountiful City to allow us to cross-country ski on the golf course during the wintertime and during the daylight hours? Because people golf and they love the course in the summertime, but they also like to cross-country ski, and it takes much longer to get to another area. And could we at all possibly be able to ski on the golf course during the winter? Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's Mrs. Black, is that right?
Yes.
Hey, thank you very much. We will get back with you. The one thing about it is we can give this to our staff, and we can make sure that we get back with you and answer that question. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, with that, we will move forward, and I'll look for an approval of the minutes, unless there's any corrections or additions from the last time that we met, which was January 9th, I believe.
Mayor, I'd be happy to make a motion that we approve the minutes as printed.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So those minutes are approved. Thank you. And we'll do council reports. And Richard, we'll start with you down here.
Nothing to report this evening, thanks.
Thank you. And please.
Nothing to report.
Thank you. Thanks, John Mark. And Beth.
Mayor, well, this is going to happen later on, but they're just going to be able to honor Emma with the Bountiful Davis Arts, and I'm very excited about that. She is such an institution in the city. I mean, it's like sad to see her go, but I don't think she's gone really. So I'm just going to pretend you're still there. So I just wanted to say something really about Emma and how wonderful, how fabulously she has served our community in terms of the Art Center all these years. I remember going over there when it was just this little tiny, area, and just her passion and enthusiasm is just phenomenal. So anyway, I could not help myself. I'm sorry. I saw you and I had to say it.
Thanks, Beth.
So
That's
thank you.
perfect. Anything else?
No other council reports at this time.
Chris.
Nothing to report at this time, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Kendallin.
So I don't have a report, but I do have a question. I've been asked a few times about the public, the live streaming of meetings. So I was wondering if we could get an update.
Yep, I think tonight's the last beta test of this. Rex probably can hear us right now from wherever he's at. Hi, Rex. And we should be able to soon, I would hope next meeting, be able to start live streaming this. And then the next step is to also get a camera in the work session room so that we can live stream those. Those will be on both on YouTube. So
Eventually when we get a camera in the other room as well, do you think that's like your estimate, maybe like a month or?
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we talked about it this last week, and I'm not even sure we might be live streaming this one, but I know it's at least our last test to make sure that the angles are right and the microphones can be picked up and all that stuff. So.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think for some here on the council, we look up and that is the all-seeing eye right there looking at us. So, yeah, maybe we'll be live pretty soon. Thank you all. We'll look for the approval of weekly expenditures greater than $1,000 paid January 1st and January 8th, 2018. You had a chance to look at those?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to move that we approve the weekly expenditures greater than $1,000 paid January 1st and 8th, 2018.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And that is unanimous.
I'm sorry, I do have just one quick question.
Okay, please.
It's too late, we already eyed.
Yeah, we eyed, but you asked the question, Kendall.
So,
Which day?
I'm looking at page 13, January 8th. So Gary, it's okay if you don't know the answer right off, maybe we can get the information later if you don't have it readily accessible. But I'm just curious about the GS Track Me, the GOS vehicle tracking service. I'm just curious what that is.
That's our tracking service we put on the bucks for sanitation trucks, monitor where they're at and make sure they're safe.
Oh,
We've been doing that for about a year now.
oh. So at any time you know where your plows are?
I've answered a lot of questions. If people have questions on sanitation, if you've been there, where we're at. I can track our plow trucks if we run into problems or there's an accident, I just follow the tracking.
That's great. Thanks, Gary.
Yes, tracking.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, it's with a little sadness and for all of us that we, but also some joy that we get to recognize our friend and our former council person, John Pitt, and we'd like John and Wendy to come up to the rostrum, if you would, please. So, John, in recognition of your long-time service, how long have you served on the city council?
12 years, with 6 years in between that I was very engaged as well.
But 12 years. That is absolutely amazing, and congratulations to you, Wendy. So we give you your little sign that you've had for all those 12 years.
Thank
That looks
you.
like it might be 12 years old or more.
It's been around.
And in the box, and then a plaque honoring your service to this city. And we love and
Thank you, Mayor. I
appreciate, we love and
appreciate that.
appreciate
Very,
you,
very
John.
much.
It's been a thrill to have you with, and we'd be happy to have both of you just say a few words here, because you've never talked before, John.
Never had a chance to say much here.
I'd like you to say a few words.
So I'll hold that.
Okay.
Thank you. You look good with flowers. So I'm not a council member, so I had to write down my words. So I hope that's okay. Thank you, Mayor Lewis, council members, city staff, and fellow citizens for this opportunity to address you this evening. At the onset, let me say one important thing. John Pitt loves Bountiful. 31 years ago, while living and working in our nation's capital, I met and soon fell madly in love with a young red-headed man from Bountiful, Utah. One of the first things I discovered about him was his great love for his hometown with the idyllic name. Being the daughter of a United States forester, I had never had a permanent hometown. So after 5 years of living in the D.C. political rat race, when the opportunity presented itself to return to my husband's hometown, we jumped at it. I have never regretted that decision. Bountiful has become the perfect place to raise our family and has provided our children with a hometown that they also love. John was literally raised on Main Street in his parents' store, the Mother Goose Shop. It was there that he was instilled with his love of small businesses and the people who run them. He went on to serve as the senior class president of Bountiful High's class of 1980. He learned valuable lessons of leadership and compromise there that have guided his life. And it has been one of the great honors of that life to serve his town for 3 terms as a councilman. He didn't serve for fame or money. He worked hard and sweated over decisions because he loves this little town. He looked forward to campaigns much more than I did, council meetings, and meetings with constituents.
He enjoyed listening to and learning from the people that live here. He loved attending every opening, every event, every parade, and festival the city has hosted. I can testify that he has given his heart and soul to Bountiful and her citizens. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to serve. I'm not sure what the future holds for the Pitt family, but I do know one thing, is that we all love Bountiful, and we're proud to call her our hometown. Thank you.
Just for those of you who might not know, Wendy has, well, she's taught really all of my grandchildren, I think, and many others at Oak Hills, and now she's teaching at Case Creek in Kaysville. So it's not only John, but also John's wife, who has served our children and served our community very, very well. Thank you, Wendy. Sir John.
Thank you. Now you have an understanding why I've not only been enjoying serving the city myself, but have been always encouraging my wife to take an active elected role in that as well. And she's always deferred that, and I think she'll continue to do that.
I think she's ambiguous. She's shaking her head.
It would be wonderful, but I leave that decision to her. But I just want to take a minute and thank each of you for the opportunity that I have had to work with you and with many others over the past, really 18 years since I first started, even though I wasn't on the council the whole time. But not just those of you who are continually up here and you know, seen week after week and meeting after meeting, but you know, I get emotional, and I wasn't going to. And then, even in the Pledge of Allegiance, I thought, oh, this is going to be tougher than I thought. But mostly, I want to just take the opportunity to thank what really the brain, the muscles, and the heart of the city. And that is those folks that really make it run. You know, this past Christmas morning, for the second year in a row, I heard the plows scraping our street on Christmas morning. And I knew it wasn't just something that automatically happened. I knew it's because our city staff got up Christmas morning and left their own families so that our streets could be plowed. And on those storms, when every other town around us is dark and we're not, I know it's not just luck. It's because our folks have been out in the backyards cutting branches and preparing and doing what they need to do. And I could go on and on about every function and every capacity that this city has. And I want to thank the dedicated people that I've had the opportunity to not just see in passing, but to understand how they work and what they do and what their values are. And I also want to take the time to thank my colleagues on the City Council. You have the advantage of working with these people, but you also have the disadvantage of being on the front line and taking criticism when, on those rare occasions, the things that they do may or may not work exactly as they're supposed to, and also for the difficult decisions that need to be addressed when you respond to every concern and need that comes up in a city of 40,000 people. And I just want to pledge to you that although I won't be voting or commenting myself, that as you make those decisions, I will stand with you because I know the effort and the research and the heartache often that goes into making those decisions. And I appreciate that you're here to do that. Chris, I particularly am glad to see you sitting there and know that you will add to the long and productive history of this council. And I just want to give you my support and thanks, and personally, especially for this. So good luck, and continue in doing the great things for our great city. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Now, John, and Wendy, why don't you come and stand right here, and then we as a council would like to be behind you, and then we ought to get a few shots of this, don't you think? We're not going to get
John, we wanted to get a plaque that was big enough to reflect your energy and enthusiasm and your personality, but they didn't have one that big.
Yeah.
So you're stuck with the smaller size.
Well, and this will hang nicely wherever I want to put it.
Thanks.
Good. Oh, no, we want you to, Wendy. Come up. We're going to get some shots.
Come on, Wendy.
Come on. Council, let's go down and let's come right down here and get some shots.
Only if you promise it's not awkward.
I didn't like flooded this morning.
you want to sneak in there a little bit? You're blocking people behind you. Okay. Can you see face? Can't see that, but you can't from where I am. Okay, I'll go first and I'll get out of the way. Okay, Beth. So everybody look at me and then I'm going to move so they can get a picture. I can see everybody's faces. Okay. Everybody say City Hall.
You didn't make us there.
I know. It was supposed to be a lot. That was too soon. Too soon. One more. Here we go. Oh, nice.
There.
1, 2, 3. Oh.
John has served on the BDAC board as well, so we need something for our Facebook page. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thanks, everybody.
Good.
Thank you.
John. We'll do that one more time.
Mayor, can I just say something about
Oh,
John?
for sure. Anybody that wants to say anything to John,
All right.
this is the time.
So, John, I first met John when we were running against each other, and so in that setting, it was interesting, but I have to tell you, John, that when I was campaigning, when I was out there knocking doors and trying to get support, I had so many people say, well, sure, you're nice and everything, maybe you can be our second choice, but we're voting for John Pitt. And so I just have to tell you that, you know, it didn't take me long to figure out that you're one of Bountiful's favorite sons, and like Wendy said, you grew up on Main Street and you championed small business. You know, I knew that your approach, after a while getting to know you, I knew your approach when you were coming up to a hard vote. You would always be open. You would always agonize. I mean, we got ulcers together over the City Hall issue. I mean, it's not easy, but you always wanted to be open and you always wanted to listen. And I really valued that, watching you and as a mentor to me. And no one would question your genuine love for our town. I mean, I did think it was, you would tear up, and it's just because you care a lot. And so we all appreciated that about you, and I loved how you called it our town. That it kind of has that charm, you know. I mean, we don't usually refer to Bountiful as a town, but that's part of how you feel about it. You just love it. It's your town, and so we could all feel that, and we all appreciate the many hours and dedication that you gave, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Mayor, can I make a comment?
Sure.
When I was considering running for city council, I knew there was no way I could beat John or Kendallin. And so I decided, well, I'm just going to put that on the back burner, and then maybe I can someday later. But then when I heard that John was not going to run again, I made the decision with my wife that I wanted to step in and help, and hopefully I can do as good a job as you, John. You're one of my heroes. I want you to know that. And what you do and what you've done for the city, and I just hope that I can fill those shoes, those big shoes that you had in this city. And you are a dear friend, John. Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Please.
thank you. So, John, I don't know if you remember this, but before I was on the council, I think it was when you had to take another post, and so you were off the council. But you said something to me, and it always stuck. And I was like, oh my gosh, that would be great. And you told me that you have so much passion for the city, and that's the key thing. And I just, you know what, that seems to be my word of the night. And I just thought, oh my gosh, that's what people need. That's what people want to have, is somebody who is passionate about helping, and that is so you. So thank you so much for all of the service that you have done. And I know Wendy was shaking her head, but Wendy, you have done a lot of service too, because I know how much of a challenge it can be to, be supportive of your spouse that's doing these types of events, and because this is not a 9-to-5 job. And I think it's been fantastic how much you both have thrown yourselves into it. So thank you very much for your service.
Thank you, Beth. Yes, sir.
John, I just remember trading places with you right here. When I would sit in the gallery and watch the council, and I always said, you know, hey, John Pitt is one of my favorite councilmen. And I just can't believe that that you were the same person that was in the band at Bountiful High School with me. But you've always impressed me. You've always cared deeply about what happens to the city, and you definitely have used your own conscience to make decisions for the betterment of Bountiful, and thank you for that.
Thank you. Anything else?
Love
Richard?
you guys.
Yeah, we love him. And hey, John, there's one thing that John does that we all recognize when he speaks up here. First, and then
you gesture a lot, is what he's trying to say.
He loves
It's
to
always
go
the
through
counting.
this point and then this point. I don't know if he's got little things around there that reminds him of stuff around his fingers, but we love you. And now we also have Emma, and I'm going to have you come up in just a second, Emma, but I think that Emma, she represents, with her husband Guy, they represent people who love to serve. And although John was up here on the podium, John has done so many things. I call it inconspicuous giving. They can give and do a lot of things, and they don't need to have it be conspicuous. They love, the people that we're honoring here tonight are people who give because they love. Would you please come up, Emma Dugal, from the Bountiful Davis Art Center. Hey, Guy, would you please come up with her, please?
Do you want me to? Oh.
No. What I want to do is I want to give you this first.
Okay.
We want to hear from both of you. Hey, how many years at the Davis?
About 20 years.
20 years. Have all of you been to the BDAC downtown? If you haven't been, it is an amazing place. You can't tell from the outside the second you walk in. That ended up being a special building. I think a lot of us feel like there wasn't anything that happened in that first year that we were all together that had more, those first couple of years, that had more an impression on downtown than having the Bountiful Davis Art Center. So we have a beautiful plaque that is artistic.
That was the requirement.
Oh, that's for me. Thank you.
And so okay. The first summer fest, we got to dance together out there in the middle of the road. It was pretty fun.
We had a date to do that.
We did. When you get done, we want to do the same thing with pictures.
Okay. Oh. Yeah, I thought he said he wanted to hear from
Guy, I think that you're supposed to still be up here.
He's going to make a break for it.
Right. Don't open it here, Guy.
No.
Do you want to talk first?
Sure.
Okay.
It's been an amazing 20 years. I've been with the Art Center 25 years, 20 with Summerfest as volunteer, and that's where we met, at Summerfest, across the green.
Wow.
Yes. We were both single at the time, but we each thought that the other was married, so we didn't do anything for a year. But it's
when we found out.
Yeah, it's not for this audience.
That was so
we
great.
love that, Guy. Beautiful.
Thank you. No,
We're not technically filming yet, so you're good.
Gary, if there is any tape of this bid at trial, I'd like to have that, please.
You'll never know.
It'll get to me. It's a small town. No, it's been an amazing ride. I've watched this woman grow, starting as a part-timer at the Art Center, and then when Arlie Kurtz was retiring, I strongly suggested that she should apply for the job, and it's my fault that she saddled with those 60-hour days, you know. No, but it's been fun. It's been fun to see her grow into the role and then take the lead and everything else, and it's been fun. I feel like John F. Kennedy, when he and Jackie went to Paris, he says, I'll forever be known as the man who accompanied Jackie to Paris, and that's the way I feel. I'm the guy behind the throne. So it's been fun, and I'd like to echo what Wendy said. None of this would be possible without the city department heads and the staff that have been so supportive of both the Art Center and of Summerfest, and of course the council and the mayor's position, Mayor Lewis, Mayor Joe, Mayor Cushing before that. So this is an incredible city. It's amazing. We talk to other people in our capacities around the country and around the world, and they're just amazed at how much support we have from the municipal government. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Guy.
Thanks, Guy.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Didn't we just do this a little while ago?
I think so.
And thank you for your kind comments, all of you. It means so much to me. I don't even know what to say. I just want to say thank you and how much I have loved working with all of you. As Guy mentioned, I have worked with 3 mayors, Mayor Cushing, Mayor Johnson, and Mayor Lewis, and all have been so supportive of the work that we have been doing at the Art Center and and I've worked with all of you council people, and I haven't worked with Councilman Simonson, but I know that you will be great and just as supportive of the Art Center, little plug there, as all of your colleagues who have made it really what it is. I mean, it has just been phenomenal. As Guy mentioned, a lot of my colleagues who work in the arts are jealous of what we have here in Bountiful and the amount of support that we do enjoy, and from the facility that we have and all the events that we have. Every department is active in supporting and helping the Art Center do what they do. I know last time I was up here, not that long ago it seems, I mentioned Chief Ross and the Bountiful Police Department and how great they have been at all our events. I always feel so safe when I see that guy. And I know all of you feel that way too. He just has a presence about him that makes these events feel very safe and cared for. And no matter what happens, it's going to be okay. So I appreciate that. But all of the departments in Bountiful City, as I said, the city administration have done such a great job in supporting not just the Art Center, but everyone and everything that goes on here. The mayor's office, and I pay a tribute to Shauna, who has, I don't know, she kind of runs the city too, doesn't she? She really does, and I understand today's her birthday, so I forgive her for not being here. She's probably out celebrating. But she's been great, and always Mayor Lewis is available. I could call him anytime, and he was right there and available and to help with any problem. The Parks Department, Summerfest is really a pain to them. I get that. I know that. They have to work so hard and do so much to make sure that it happens, and I appreciate what they do. The Power Department, still here. They do a lot too. I mean, you wouldn't think so, but they really do. They help a lot with setup and making sure everything's okay. The engineering and planning department, so instrumental in when we had our renovation. It was awesome, their involvement. Also, I'd like to thank my family, of course. my husband Guy, who you have an idea that we work together really, really well and always have. And he was with me every inch of the way and often went above and beyond anything that any sane husband or even friend or distant relative would have done. And I just can't thank him enough. I don't think I really could have done it without him. My son Ryan, who's in the audience, has also been extremely supportive and helpful in all facets of what I was doing, and as well as other family members. We thrive on our volunteers. We have so many volunteers who are engaged at the Art Center in one way or another, who make things happen because we're a pretty small staff, pretty low funded, paid, but it is definitely a labor of love, and we learn that from our volunteers who are willing to do it day in and day out for nothing, and they just love it. I worked with some great board members at the Art Center, particularly the year that I left, or that just recently, it wasn't that long ago. We had such an active and dynamic board, and last year we were headed by Joe Johnson, who was our chair, and boy, he just really helped get things moving along, and nobody engages people like he does. It's just wonderful to have him on your team. So fortunate. I just have to mention the artists and performers, both musical, visual, all the different arts that are represented at the Art Center from really all over the world. We have friends from just about everywhere that we call our own that have been involved in Summerfest or at exhibits at the Art Center and classes or whatnot. Right now we have a very, very capable staff headed by Elisa Ravel, who has taken my place and who will lead the Art Center into great things. I think it's just amazing in the last 20 years to watch what's happened and how it's grown. And I believe that it's going to be just as much growth in the next 20 years. And we have a young staff. They're all pretty young and dynamic, and they're up to speed on everything. So we're really happy about that. And just the last thing I want to say is I know if you know me, you know how passionate I am about the arts and culture. And as I've said before, I really believe that it's the arts and culture that give a place its identity and its character. And this is what I've seen happen in Bountiful. Not quite like Paris yet, but if you think of all the great cities in the world, the first thing you think of is the arts and their culture and the physical beauty of these places. So that's why I think the arts, one reason I think the arts are so important. Also, I see the arts as a bridge. It engages people, all ages, all persuasions, everything. And it unites people. And that's what I've seen happen at the Art Center, and in partnership with Bountiful City, we have been able to engage thousands of people in a positive endeavor that have brought people closer together and have improved their quality of life. And for that, it just made my job just so rewarding, and I thank you so much. And and you haven't seen the last of me. There might be some of you who are saying, Man, I'm glad she's not going to be pestering me anymore with her handout and whatever. But I am still going to be involved in the arts on a state level and on a county level and even at Bountiful in city level. There's lots of projects I have in my mind that I'd like to see happen, and I think you and I have talked about some of them, and I would love to help out any way I can. So thank you.
Thank you. Mayor, I'll stay here. Mayor, could I ask Emma a question?
Yes.
I enjoy going to the Art Center, and I've yet, though, to see a display of decoy ducks and shorebirds.
Of who?
Now you know why.
Did I open up something here?
No.
I, for the last 20, 25 years, have carved and painted decoy ducks and shorebirds. And I've gone down and I've spent time there. I've yet to see a display of decoy ducks and shorebirds.
Okay, Elisa.
All right, well, talk to Elisa. She's right there. She'll get you set up, okay?
I will visit. I will visit. Thank you.
That'll be great.
Emma,
Thank you.
I just want to thank you for your dedication. I remember as a child loving Summerfest, and you're right, that those things make us a community. And I think that, I remember as a little girl thinking, this is my city, and look at the kind of amazing things that are happening here, and it just makes you feel a part of the community. So we can't thank you enough for your work that you've done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Emma, one other thing. Having passion for the arts and culture is one thing, but being able to lead a winning organization is a whole other thing. Lots of us have passion for arts and culture, but you've taken that, and with the ability of yourself and the organization, have made Bountiful Davis Art Center into something that it's easy for all of us to support, because it's obviously such a winning product. So thanks for not only your passion, but for your skills too, and for bringing on staff that's going to continue that after your departure. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
I did want to say one more thing since I, get the
Sheesh,
opportunity.
Beth, you're just embarrassing me.
Oh, stop it. Okay, I'll keep going.
No, I'm
I remember the first time that we did, that I was involved in Summerfest, and I was just, I think, newly on Bountiful Davis Art Center board, and one of the things that I thought was so amazing, because right then, during this time, it was the height of the recession, and it was a real challenge. And one of the things that was discussed is, what can we do to do something for our community that's not going to be, overly burdensome to people. People love to enjoy things, but right then, it was a challenging time, and everything about Summerfest was just so amazing. I mean, you're getting these dancers coming in, you're getting these artists coming in, and they just want to connect. And I think it was just one of the most amazing things that really, I think, has continued to shape. Obviously, it shaped Councilwoman Harris, but it's continued to shape, I think, the community and the spirit that we have. And so, and I'm going to echo Councilman Higginson. That was very true. You have taken this type of an organization and really structured it and used your skill set to make it an even better option for our residents. And it's so interconnected into our fabric now that it's just wonderful. And we owe you the thank you for that. So you have just done such a great job.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, today I spent the whole day down at Wasatch Choice 2050 looking to the future. One of the persons came up to me and said, now, who are you? And I said, I'm Mayor Lewis of Bountiful. And they said, oh, we come to Summerfest every year.
There you go.
You want to say anything?
Emma, thank you so much for introducing a lot of people in Bountiful to the arts through art classes and through education and through being able to display their art. And we're a better community for that. And I also want to say that you are one tough lady, because we tore your building down, and you went and found a new home for a little bit,
Mhm.
but I am so glad that we were able to bring you back and put you in such a premier location on Main
Beautiful.
Street. It's just nice. And thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks, John Mark.
Thank you. And now, if you'll come, we'll get a picture. We'll do the same thing.
Chief Ross, would you mind being in the picture with us?
No, I'm not going anywhere. No. No. Yay.
Oh, that's so great.
Emma, stop talking, just smile. There we go. Thank
Thank you, too. Hey, Elisa, this is Elisa, the new director of the Bountiful Davis Art Center. I'm so glad.
you. Because I got it. So in a couple months, we're going to be
She's gone to work.
Nice.
She's gone to work already. Thank you, Elisa. Well, I hope you all that were here realize that that took a little time, and it was, if anything, it was too little. These people are deserving of a lot of praise and love from this city, and glad that we could add a little bit to it. I'm going to turn some time over now to Chad Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mayor. This item is to appoint some members of our administrative committee with the recent council reassignments or the council reassignments. We have an opening in our administrative committee. The administrative committee is a committee that reviews items that need a little bit of discretion but are primarily administrative in nature. The code calls for a citizen representative and an alternate. Dave Badham has been serving on the committee for quite some time. Would like to continue to do that, and it's also proposed that Beth Holbrook be appointed to serve as a citizen representative on that committee. We are recommending that the council confirm the mayor's recommendation on that. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do I have a motion?
Move to approve those?
Second?
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Yes. Just want to thank Mr. Knight for his service there for such an extended period of time.
12 years,
Yeah,
longer than I've been on the council.
that's a long time. Thanks.
So you were there before you were a council person?
Yeah, that is correct.
Wow.
Mayor Johnson put me on.
That's wonderful. I forgot to recognize Mayor Johnson, by the way. I was wishing I look out there and recognize him as our previous mayor.
And I apologize for not recognizing John. He's done a fantastic job.
That's okay.
So-
You know,
I have told him thank you in private, but yeah, in public.
I
So
don't-
any further discussion?
I don't see Dave here. He's not here, is he?
He's not.
Okay.
So all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And that motion passes. Now I'm going to turn some number 9 back over to Chad Wilkinson. Chad.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to actually go up to the podium here in just a second. When people are watching, it's hard to remember your password.
Those
I
are
have
quick,
fat
though.
fingers, too. All right,
You're
I'm going to go
going to-
very slowly.
No pressure now.
I just did it again. I could feel it. Yeah, thank you. Nikki was offering to switch the screen so it wouldn't be quite so embarrassing, but let's see. We'll do that later. Okay. Fun stuff, technology. So I just want to take just a few moments to go over the background on this amendment. We've talked about the downtown a lot in the last year or so. And this is a continuation of that discussion. Just as background, you'll remember that back in October, it was October 10th, the council approved some changes to the downtown zoning standards. And as part of the motion to approve those changes, council directed staff to coordinate with the Planning Commission and to organize some work sessions with the Planning Commission where the council and Planning Commission could talk about some further refinements to the ordinance that had just been adopted. So we did that. We had a work session on October 24th and another follow-up session on December the 12th. So the things we're going to talk about tonight are the result of those of the direction that we received from the Council and Planning Commission at those work sessions. So I wanted to be clear about kind of how we got to this point today. After receiving that direction from the Council and Commission, we've gone through and brought forward some proposals that we hope get at those directions that we received. Some of those we've taken general direction and tried to come up with some specific standards. Others, the direction was more specific, and we've just brought those forward as recommendations. So I want to give some additional background that I think would be helpful. In the last several weeks, I've had conversations with members of the development community, citizens, and there's been a little bit of confusion about what we're doing in this process. And I want to just maybe take just a few minutes and describe what it is that this process is about. First of all, this is a text amendment, not a map amendment. And we use a word in land use called a zone change. A zone change is kind of a general term. It can mean a zoning ordinance change. It can mean a zone change on a map. So we try to get a little more specific when we do our public notices and things, and distinguish between a zone map amendment and a zoning text amendment. There's been some confusion that this proposal is a zone map amendment. It's not. So there's no properties that are changing zoning. The properties we're talking about tonight have been downtown zoned for many years. None of those properties are proposed to be changed. And so we're really just talking about the standards that direct the development within that existing zone. It's been an existing zone for a long time. One other point that I want to make that has been, as I've talked to citizens and residents about this area, that's been a point of confusion, and that is multifamily development is allowed there now. It's been allowed there for many years. We're not proposing a new use in this downtown. What we are talking about is the development standards that apply to that use. There have been restrictions on development of multifamily and different design standards and things for many years as well, but it has been allowed for a long time. So we're not talking about creating a new use downtown. All right, now that's to address some of the concerns and questions I've had from some of our citizens and residents. I want to talk about maybe some things that have been maybe confusing to just in general about the standards. First of all, when we adopted the standards in October, back on October 10th, we limited, well, let me back up a little bit. We left alone the standard that said that multifamily in that zone is limited to 13 units per acre, consistent with the RM13 zone. That was the density that was allowed previously. We didn't change it. What we did do was we made it more specific that in the past, there hadn't been a lot of clarification about mixed-use development. We had developments that have been brought forward in the past that had horizontal mixed use. In other words, they had a commercial component that was one building. They had a residential component that was another building. It's a horizontal mixed use. And so those developments were able to not be subject to the RM13 standard because they were considered to be mixed use. We clarified that what the initial vision for this area was for vertical mixed use. It was for mixed use that occurred within a building. So that would be commercial use on the bottom, residential use on the top. So we clarified that in the code that you adopted on October 10th. Another key component of that, density and setbacks for standalone multifamily, that's something without a mixed use component, are currently the same as RM13 standards. That's today's code. That's the code that was adopted on October 10th, and it's actually the code that was in existence before. So that didn't change. And I think that's a really important point. We're going to talk about development standards such as height and architecture. As we've been talking through that with different folks, there's been some confusion about what we're talking about. when we talk about standalone multifamily, these are the things that apply. It's 13 units to the acre, unless it's within a vertical mixed-use development, and then it's the density and setbacks are the same as for an RM13 zone. We want to talk about this in just a little more detail after I go through the standards, but mixed use, as we've looked at that and as we've talked to people about it, it's not as clearly defined in the code as maybe it ought to be. And as we talked about those changes to specify vertical mixed use, it's easy for the assumption to be made that everybody thinks that's the same thing. What we've been finding is that there's a lot of interpretation of what that means. So I'll talk about a potential standard to clarify that in a minute. Just one last note, our 2-to-1 ratio standard that we've talked about so much, we talked about it back in October, we've talked about it at the work sessions, that only applies to standalone multifamily, doesn't apply to those mixed-use buildings. So as we go forward, that's something to keep in mind. All right, that was a lot of background. So now, building height is the first thing I want to talk about, and then I'm going to go into each of the standards. There's not a lot of changes, so I'm going to actually go through each of those proposed changes one by one, but this is one that on the left-hand side of the screen is the standard that you approved in October, 35 feet on 100 west, 100 east. There's a step back. I didn't put all the intricacies of the code in there, but there's a step back provision that allows you to go up to 45 feet with 100 feet of additional setback, 55 feet with 200 feet of additional setback. As proposed in this version that's before you tonight, it's 45 feet on 100 west, 100 east, and with an allowance for 55 feet at a 200-foot setback. So,
Chad, how deep is the block, for instance, from 100?
let me show you, actually. Councilman Knight asked me to kind of show what that looks like on the ground, and I think that was a good idea. So I've
I anticipated your question.
put together, hopefully a little, all right. That's okay. I'm prepared for that as well. So this would be, and again, this applies to both sides of the downtown zone, but this blue line represents 100 feet, and tried to go as close as I could to that sidewalk, which would be closer to the property line. But I think it's helpful to kind of see it in context with the buildings that you're familiar with. Those are those new buildings built by Hepworth on First South. Going south, you can see the fire station. Let's see, the Arvin Floral lot. I'm going to go back north as soon as I get down to the south and show you the 200-foot line. And this would be 200 feet. So it's not quite mid-block. You can see where
So
in
would you say
relation
that
to the
it's
tennis
close
court.
to 600 feet, if you're calculating from that
Oh,
perspective?
the block length itself, we know. I know it by,
650 feet center to center.
The Mhm.
roads are about 100 feet wide, so you're about 5.
yeah, 5-something, 100 feet.
Okay.
Yeah. But then, a little bit less going north and south. But that, again, gives you the relation to existing buildings we recognize. I think that can help you, if you remember the setback to the post office building, that's where 200 feet hits that building. It's a little bit into the building. Some of the lots, it's pretty close to right on the boundary. So just give you an idea of what that looks like, and just very quickly, just on the other side. Now, one thing that's important to remember is that, of course, wouldn't apply to properties that aren't zoned DN. There's a number of properties on the east side, on First East, that aren't zoned downtown. They're zoned single-family residential. This doesn't apply to them, but it gives you an idea of what those setbacks look like on that other side. And I can go through. I'll put up the zoning map here in just a minute as I go through the standards. Does that answer that question? I can try to answer a little bit better as we go.
Now,
Okay, let me go back and.
can you go over real quick what the proposal is that was passed on? And I mean just passed by the Planning Commission?
Oh, I'll go through the whole thing.
What does it talk about on setbacks and height?
I will go through that whole thing.
And can you, because I think it's important that you look at the usability of that space if there's a 200-foot setback.
Actually, I got into the show, and I don't need to, because that's the next thing I was going to do is go through that ordinance piece by piece. So if you'll indulge me for a minute, there's not a huge amount of changes, so I'm just going to go through those in detail so you can see what those are. So no changes at the beginning of the ordinance from what was adopted in October. The first change that we run into is, well, this is a renumbering change. We had some formatting issues we're still working through to get the numbers right. The first substantial change we get to is under structure height. So as proposed through those work sessions, the feedback that we got, the direction that we received, buildings located within 200 feet of 100 west, 100 east. 45 feet is the maximum height, again, measured at the average grade of the parcel. As we go back an additional, well, as we get back past the 200-foot line, then it goes up to 55 feet. Specific direction we received was to take out the maximum stories language, so there's no longer a requirement or a maximum number of stories. So it could be whatever number of stories you could fit within that 45-foot height. We also took out the 1 to 10 setback to height ratio that was included in the original ordinance. It was adopted in October. A couple little clarifications. There, spelling mistake there, just things we're catching as we go. As was mentioned in the work session, you find these little Scrivener errors as you go, and we're correcting those as we go. So the next thing I want to talk about has to do with landscaping. We had one of our members of our development community brought up that landscaping in this zone right now for multifamily developments was required to be 40%, which is the standard for the RM zone. Felt that was incompatible with the setbacks and other development standards that are required in the downtown zone. We felt that was a good thing to look at. We did, though, feel that multifamily uses, even mixed uses that have multifamily as part of them, there's a need for some additional open space for those residents. Not a lot. We've proposed 50 additional square feet per unit in addition to the 10% that would be required for any property in the zone, just to give additional open space, additional green space for residents living those developments. Toyed around with 100 feet, 50 feet's just a number that we chose based on trying to provide some additional landscaping for those units. Okay.
I have a question about that.
Yes.
How does that, if we're looking at the 2-to-1, does that pretty much take care of that same issue, would you think? Or how does that change things with that?
No, it's kind of addressing a different thing. Depending on the number of units, you might not get to anywhere close to the 40% requirement. Really with the 50 square feet. And again, we could look at just a straight percentage requirement. You could say instead of this additional landscaping, you could say we're just going to require 20% for these types of developments as opposed to the 40% that was required. So it doesn't necessarily constrain the development site. It will a little bit, but not enough to have that same impact as the 2-to-1. The 2-to-1 is more about building scale, height, width. Landscaping, of course, is related to that, but it's really getting at a different standard, just trying to get some open space downtown. So I guess maybe I'm not answering the question, but you could potentially have a building that met the landscape standard based on what we've proposed. That could still potentially be bigger than 2-to-1, if we didn't have that standard. So does that make sense? Is that what you were asking, Kendallin? Or
Yeah.
if it's not, it's okay. I'll try
I just
again.
didn't know if that addressed the problem without having this extra language. I was just,
No, and it's kind of trying to address a different issue rather than the,
it's not redundant.
yeah. And that issue was brought up kind of after we looked at the, during that first process, but it's more related to, if we have a 40-foot landscape requirement, it could sometimes be difficult to get the buildings as close to the street as we want to, because we have to have so much landscaping there. So I was trying to say, if you're going to have a requirement to have buildings closer to the street, you're probably going to have to reduce the landscaping some to make that happen. So that's really what we're trying to get at with that standard. Okay, we good to continue? Now I'm going to get into the architectural standards. We've clarified that buildings have to have we talked about this originally in October, have to have an entrance that's oriented to face a street. Before we said plaza, we've clarified that needs to be a public plaza. And then here's the architectural standards. the buildings need to meet the ground with some form of base element or detailing to visually connect the building to the landscape. This was an issue that we talked about at Planning Commission. I'm going to talk about the action taken by Planning Commission in just a minute, but both of the motions included a revision to this language, and I will show you that in just a minute. It has to do with being more specific than just saying a material compatible with the remainder of the building. They specified some materials that would be appropriate for the zone. I'll get into that in just a minute. We also had some standards related to preventing blank walls on street-facing facades. That standard's in front of you. It needs to be 50% of either pedestrian entrances, display windows, windows affording views into a retail or office or restaurant space. All development needs to provide ground floor windows on the building facade if they're adjacent to a public or private street. Darkly tinted windows and mirrored windows are prohibited as ground floor windows, just to provide that kind of pedestrian atmosphere in the area.
Chad?
Yes.
Not to get too mired down into it, but, okay, if you have a facade that is going to have at least some type of a devoted to pedestrian entrances, in other words, if you're talking residential, then are you going to then put design restrictions or requirements, I should say, on the doors themselves to have like windows, or is it just a door sufficient and then a window?
Yeah, usually if you have that ground floor entrance, it's not a problem. Usually that takes care of itself because you have units down there,
right,
and they're going to have windows on units. Really, this is talking about commercial buildings as well, and not having big blank
So it's all encompassing for mixed
brick
use?
walls. Yes, it includes all those buildings. Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. And there's some good examples of ground floor windows. We showed last time at the Planning Commission, and I can bring those up if you'd like. We showed examples of the White House and of the BDAC right across the street. Both of them have ground floor windows on those kind of service sides on, would that be First North? And, you know, they've accomplished that by putting up some privacy drapes and screens, so they have some privacy inside, but it still looks like a window. It's appealing to a pedestrian walking by. You can see that there's a window there, rather than just a big, long expanse of brick or stucco or whatever. Yeah. Right. Next one is addressing the same issue in a different way, talking about articulation, though, specifically. Precluding large expanses of uninterrupted building surfaces. We talked about a couple of different ways to skin this at the work sessions. We decided that this linear foot requirement was the easiest to administer and the clearest for someone to understand. So that's what we've proposed. This one is, again, requiring you have horizontal and vertical offsets at a certain interval. 20 feet is the requirement that's proposed. Every 20 feet you have to have some of these features, recesses, which would be, you know, places where the building goes in from the main face, at least 4 feet in depth. Extensions, same thing, or offsets or breaks in the roof elevation of 3 feet or more in height. So that's just trying to give some articulation, some ups and downs, some ins and outs on the buildings. And that, again, applies to all the buildings, and not just the multifamily.
So what that isn't saying, I apologize.
Yeah, go ahead.
What that
That's
isn't
what we're here
saying then is that there's not a requirement for different materials for different heights or bump outs or anything else like that, or offsets or balconies. It's just, it can be the same materials for the entire facade as long as there's some architectural interest. Is that
So it gives some options for what can be done, and I'll just read through it. Offsets, balconies, projections, similar elements. It's meant for those places facing a public right-of-way or public plaza, and it's got some examples: elevated decks, patios, entrances. But to answer your question, there's not a certain building material required. Now, with a multifamily, there is a requirement for a certain amount of brick, stone that has to be incorporated into that building. Right. So that does have a standard that was already in the code. We didn't change that. But we're trying to give the maximum amount of flexibility while recognizing that there needs to be some type of articulation, something that provides some visual interest to the building, so just what the standard said, so that we avoid or preclude large expanses of uninterrupted building surfaces down there.
Right.
This is one that we did have some good discussion at the Planning Commission. You know, we talked about different, 30-foot was the standard that we had originally looked at. You know, these buildings are more at a 20-foot dimension. I lost that word for a second. I'll just show you. We've seen these before. Oh,
Beth, would you be in favor of color or material changes?
No, I just wanted to, and I wasn't talking about specifically that there had to be a certain type of a material used. I was mostly talking about the fact, was it be a requirement? Because anytime you do some of those architectural changes, sometimes builders do or developers do a different type of material.
Accent.
And I didn't know if that was going to be, I didn't know what you were trying to accomplish with that, so I wanted to clarify.
Just offsets. I'll show you on this building, now that I've got the internet connection. You've got some good offsets on this building, up and out, trying to accomplish some of that, so we don't have just a blank or uninterrupted building surface on that, on those frontages. So not really getting at building materials as much as ins and outs.
This is the one right behind Vito's?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
You had something else, Beth. Sorry to interrupt you.
And I was like, and I thought you were going to keep going, so I thought I'll just wait to ask at the end.
I'm
But just to clarify, that obviously that's strictly residential, and what you're talking about in all of this is also incorporating this into the mixed use element as well.
Yeah, commercial and all the buildings.
And so theoretically, that could be all brick or all stucco with the offsets. Yes?
On a commercial building, there's no brick requirement.
Strictly on the mixed use only. Okay.
Yep. Okay.
Can you go back to the overlay picture and then kind of zoom in to where on First West where the post office is?
Is this the one you're talking about?
Yeah, kind of. Now, yeah, that's it right there. Now, how far? What's the setback standard for the houses on the east side of First West? What's the setback on those?
On the east side of First West?
Yeah.
So that's in the downtown zone for the most part. You're talking about the west side of First West.
The west side.
It's 25 feet.
25 feet?
Yeah.
And then how wide is the road, did you say?
100. Roughly 100.
95 feet?
99 feet.
99 feet. Okay. And then the blue area is if there's a 100-foot setback. That's where
You can have a building in the blue area.
being built right there. And then,
Be 35 feet.
And at the orange section, towards the center of Main Street, that's where the current changes say that you could build 45 feet high, right?
So the current standard would say 45 feet within that entire zone, that entire area. The existing, what was adopted in October, is 35. But as we've presented it to you, it's 45 all the way to 200 feet, and then it goes up to 55.
It starts where does it start? 40 feet high.
45 feet high?
45 feet high.
Under the existing or the proposed?
Proposed.
Right here.
Right at the blue.
20 feet at the setback line, so 20 feet back, or 25, depending on the type of development.
I mean, you could go 25 feet and then build 45 feet up?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to soldier on here for just a minute and get through the rest. There's not much left. We talked about this specifically at the work sessions, that we were concerned about having, a lot of times on these buildings, one of the ways to accommodate the required parking is to put that parking underneath the building within the footprint. And we were concerned about having the same types of issues that we've had with our tilt-up building over by the roundabout, over close to Renaissance, with the venting and the louvered type openings that allow you to see into the garage. We wanted to make sure that these buildings were consistent on a pedestrian scale with the other buildings in the zone. So this is meant to incorporate design features on that ground floor, if there's parking underneath, that are consistent with the remainder of the building, pedestrian oriented. This includes doors, false windows, planters, architectural details that provide articulation. We did want to clarify that false windows need to be an actual built-in window, not just a tacked-on display case. Sometimes people have, in other places that I've been, have met those types of requirements by just tacking on a 2-inch thick display case, and that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for actual windows, and that another requirement would be that the required venting or louvered openings not be located on the street-facing side, that they put those on those other sides of the building, so that we don't have those showing up. And I mean, I can show, this is not necessarily a critique of the tilt-up building. and I might have to go to a different place to get this. I'm not sure if it's going to show up on Street View. But again, you've seen what we're talking about. There's kind of those grates that are on the ground floor. They just go right into that building. I'm not sure it's going to pop up. Let's see. Oh yeah, that's good enough. So these openings on this first floor, they're not really windows. They're just an opening that have a grate over them, so they can have the venting for those vehicles.
The vehicles.
And what we're proposing is to have something that's architecturally compatible with the remainder of the building. And this building's built under a different standard, so don't. The architecture is not what we're judging here. We're just trying to show the example of when you have openings that are, rather than grates, that they be something pedestrian oriented, like a door or a window, and try to avoid that parking lot look on the first floor.
So Chad, I have a question with that. So you're focused specifically on the pedestrian side for the louver, or not a louver, but another type of a material.
Yeah.
In lieu of what they have right there currently. Is that right?
What we just showed on that building?
Right.
Yeah, I think what they've got
Because
there.
you walk, obviously.
Yeah, they're not really a window. It's just an
literally
opening.
on top of the sidewalk.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so it'd be doors, it'd be architectural features, things that give some pedestrian interest as you walk down, rather than just
Is there a requirement to do the grates? There's not some airflow issue or anything like that?
I
Some
think
of it is, isn't
there
it?
are some requirements, but you could put those on other sides. They don't have to be designed on that front side.
Okay.
So you're going to always have some type of non-street facing side, so that's what we're looking for.
Okay, thanks.
I don't know. It has evolved.
Okay. Almost done. We struck through that language that required architecture consistent with single-family dwellings along First East and First West, as was requested. And I think we might be there. So that's the standards. I have just a couple more things to talk about. I want to talk about what happened at the Planning Commission. Before I do that, though, I'm jumping ahead a little bit. I want to talk about the revision that both motions that were forwarded by both motions that were not forwarded, I guess I should say, the ones that didn't pass, include a revision to that language related to the base element. It just made it more specific. It says the base element may be smooth concrete, masonry, or stone, rather than just saying materials compatible. It gave some detail. Then the other thing was, again, talking about mixed use, defining what that means. One concern is that we don't want to have what's really a residential building that's just been given a token commercial space to be called mixed use. We don't think that was the intent of the ordinance. I think the idea was to have viable, real mixed use. Those buildings there at First South and Main Street are good examples of that. There's commercial use on the bottom, residential on top. It's a mixed use building. So this is to try to get at that standard. We've proposed that if you decide to go forward with this change tonight, that we clarify that mixed use be defined as shown in that second bullet, which is, in order to be considered vertical mixed use, at least 75% of ground floor square footage shall be developed as commercial use. Areas within the building footprint used for parking or accessory uses commonly associated with multifamily residential uses such as sales, management offices, storage space, laundry facilities, or interior recreational or meeting space intended for use by the residents of the development shall not be counted toward meeting the 75% requirement. So sometimes we've had, mixed-use developments where the proposal is, well, it's mixed use if we have our sales office on the ground floor. That's not mixed use. That's an accessory use to the residential use up above. So it needs to be a bona fide commercial use. We can talk about whether that 75 is the right number or not, but we would like to really clarify that, because it makes a big difference in which of those architectural standards, which of those ratio standards, densities, those all are contingent on whether this is a mixed use or not. So it's important for us to make sure that it's clear when we say mixed use what that means, what that vertical mixed use means. So the Planning Commission made two separate motions at their meeting a week ago. Both failed, voted 2-2. We had 4 commission members there that week. So the third motion that was made was to forward the council the item without a formal recommendation, to include the minutes, which you have in your packet. The minutes of the meetings have been included. We had a very large response from residents of that area. You can see their comments in your minutes. So those have been forwarded to you for your consideration. At this point, the council has some options. First of all, this is a public hearing, so we would recommend that you take public comment from whoever's here that would like to speak. But you have some options after that. Your options are number one, you can remand this to the Planning Commission. What that simply means is that you give it back to the Planning Commission and ask them to give you a recommendation. The code gives 30 days for the Planning Commission to make a recommendation from the time they first hear the proposal. We're still within that 30 days. So you can ask the Planning Commission to look at this and give you a formal recommendation. There's some advantages to that. You know, this is an important process that we're going through. It'll guide the development of the area for the next 50, 60 years. So it's important that we have the input that's needed to make sure we get the right standards in place. You know, I think the additional discussion of the Planning Commission could be a real benefit in that process. So that's option number one. Second, you can request yourselves additional revisions. You can say to us, we're not ready to make a decision tonight. We'd like you to bring us back some additional changes. We'll look at those next time and make a decision ourselves. That's an option. You can approve the standards that we presented to you as proposed or with revisions that you specify tonight. Or you can simply deny. We have the standard in place. You don't have to make the changes. So those are the four options that you have tonight. With that, I will be happy to answer questions now, or if you'd like to take public comment, and then be happy to answer questions after the public comment. And I'd invite, Richard was in attendance at the Planning Commission meeting as well. If you have other feedback on what happened to the Planning Commission, I'd be happy to have you jump in there too. So,
I've got a question for you right now.
Yeah.
Of those four options, which would you prefer we choose?
You know, I think there's some real advantage to having the Planning Commission make a formal recommendation. I think that the Planning Commission, you know, there's a purpose for having a Planning Commission, and these are citizen volunteers, they're neighbors and friends, they're folks that live here in Bountiful that have an interest in the development of the community, and they really, the purpose for that commission is just this. One of their main responsibilities that's spelled out in the state code is to make recommendations to you on land use. And so I think a recommendation from them is important. And I think we were getting maybe deadlocked on some details that could potentially be ironed out with additional members of the Planning Commission there. So I think there's some value in that. That's my 2 cents.
Would we need to hold necessarily public hearings in both of the subsequent meetings?
You've met the public hearing requirement. They certainly would be public meetings, though. I mean, they would be publicly noticed, and we'd have an open meeting that people could come. But you have, after the public hearing tonight, you will have met the public hearing requirement. I wouldn't limit yourself to not taking comments. I wouldn't tie your hands that way if you wanted to, but you've certainly met the legal requirement.
So were you asking Richard whether we would need to have it if we were doing what he recommended?
Only if Chad would recommend
hold
additional public hearings.
So, gotcha. Okay.
And any of these actions are within the authority of the council. I don't want to. I want to make sure I'm not saying you have to do that, but I think there is some value.
Good. Well, if you all feel good, why don't we open this to a public hearing?
Yeah.
And then we'll move from there. And with that, I will open this up as a public hearing and just remind you that when you come up, would you please tell us your name and where you're from and address the council. And we would very much appreciate your participation. So,
Mayor,
yes.
if I, just as a point of clarification,
yes.
Is there a time limit or a time? Is there some guidance for how much time you'd like them to spend, or it's up to you?
2 or 3 minutes. Thank you. Thanks for that clarification. Yeah, I think 2 or 3 minutes would be. Yeah.
Lynn Bascom, 195 North, 100 East. I'm curious, and maybe I can't get the answer here, but I'm curious where the pressure is coming from to move the provision from 35 feet to 45 feet. My concern is that if we move it to 45 feet, what happens next year or the year later? I see in downtown Sugar House, they had great planning years ago, and now they're building very large buildings there, and certainly we don't want that. We realize that there is a need for apartments in the Bountiful area. We simply, as citizens, at the planning meeting the other night, there was not one Bountiful citizen that was in favor of changing the height from 35 to 45. I think the people of Bountiful should be heard. We've been here a number of times, and it seems that there's pressure outside to raise that height. The setback, we heard earlier and Kendall, and you could help me maybe, but how John mentioned how he's passionate about Bountiful. So are we. And we want to make sure that we don't destroy the Bountiful City that we're all used to. Thank you.
Thanks, Len. Anyone else? Please.
My name is J.D. Watt. I live at 96 East 100 North. I have some comments from the previous meeting. All I ask is, can somebody make a decision instead of passing things from here to there, from there to here? Make up your mind. And I ask too also, what are you going to do for infrastructure? Your east and west streets aren't wide enough to do anything. You've got the Bountiful Arts Place is down the street from my house. When they've got an event going on, you can't get two cars past each other because the roads are so narrow, everybody parks on the roads. All of your new apartments and mixed-use stuff, there's not enough parking behind them to do anything, so everybody's on the streets. So it makes it hard for people to get around. How your plow guys do it, I have no clue. I work for another city, and man, I'd be pushing people's cars out of the way. Because there's some nights there is no room at all. You don't have an infrastructure, so what are you going to do? How are you going to upgrade your infrastructure for all these other people? Because you don't have parking on lots that's required for these buildings that they want to build. I understand you got to change Bountiful. Bountiful's no longer the old where it was with the co-op and Bountiful Drug and all that. Times change, things change. People need places to live. I'm all in for that. But you just got to do it wisely to make sure that there's places for people to park. For all of this, because your businesses, most of your businesses, everybody parks on the road. Nobody parks in parking lots. Nobody parks where they're supposed to. It's on the streets, and it's making it tough for people to get around. To go up and down Center Street at any point in time, that freeway is a joke. And First East and First West, traffic goes so fast the poor officers can't keep up, and they can't keep officers there 24/7 because the city's so big. So you've got to start doing something. If you're going to make downtown bigger, you better give the officers more money for more cars, more stuff to do there, because it's only going to get faster, and you're going to have a lot more problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it J.D.?
Yes.
Thanks, J.D. And the police thank you as well.
I know you've already heard from me before, but I live in that area, and my home is on First East, 205 North First East, Ethel Black, and I did all what these men have said. We like living downtown because we like the activities, but we also have to put up with some of the negative. And I certainly don't want a 4- or 5-story building of apartments just behind me to the west of me. So I would vote for the lower height. I think you can get enough people downtown, and you can't handle even that many if you have the restriction of the 30 or 35 feet high that you have now. So, maybe you guys ought to walk downtown and see how it feels on those buildings that are very, very high, and see if you'd want to live there and come and go and try and get around in that situation. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Brown. Any others? Please.
Hi, my name's Ryan Downer. I live on 125 West, 400 South. And I just wanted to voice, I showed a picture, and Chad, if you could pull that up, that'd be great. I showed a picture at the last week's meeting. I kind of echo some of the concerns that have been mentioned before. This is the 7th meeting that I've come to discuss these things. And I think, before you pull that up, Chad, I think one thing that may have been misinterpreted the last time we got together was I'm I'm totally okay with the fact that this area is zoned as mixed-use zone. That's how it is, and we've been through a whole process. I can't remember, Chad, the name of the process that we came where we polled a whole bunch of citizens and voted, and that initiative.
The Plat A survey?
Yeah, like the Plat A survey and how we came up with all that. So, if that's where everybody's okay with and that's what the public wants, you know what, that's okay. I'm okay with that. What makes me nervous is the last time we were in one of these meetings, I was curious how tall 35 feet and 45 feet is. And so I got my boys. I'm standing on the west side of First West, and it's hard to see, but my son is standing there. One's hugging the stop sign pole. He must have been bored. The other one's holding a 99-inch PVC pipe that, rounding down to 8 feet, that's how high that white pipe is. And then I took a line that mimicked that same height, and I stacked it on top of each other 6 stacks high. So you can see where 8 feet is, where 35 feet is, and where 45 feet is. I'm okay that we have some apartment buildings that are built there. What makes me really, really nervous is the fact, why do we need to increase it from 35 to 45 feet? I echo the previous concerns of the additional infrastructure that's going to come and that's going to put a tax on things. It will. It's going to congest things. Me and my boys ride our bikes up and down the street. We love that. Going from 35 to 45, I don't understand why. That's my big question, and personally, I think 35 feet is more than enough. I don't understand why we would go to 45 feet, but I think this picture speaks volumes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please. Oh, do you want to just say it from there? Can you speak really loudly? Okay. Thank you. Well, we may be able to answer it tonight. We may have to answer it at a different time. But your question is a good one, and it will be answered. Okay. Thank you for being here. Oh, sir.
Good evening. My name is Mike Allred. I am a resident of Bountiful, have been for almost 40 years. I'll try and answer their question. In the November meeting that we had, we all agreed to downzone Plat A from R13 to R4. And we made that decision to downzone or to pass that ordinance at that time, because I remember Chad mentioned there were several projects that were waiting for the moratorium to be lifted. And so we went ahead and we adopted the ordinance as it was. But we did that with the caveat, I remember Richard mentioned it, everybody came together and said, we have to have a place for multi-use, for high-density development in the downtown area. And so we're going to come back and we're going to make recommendations that encourage high-density development. We're going to come back quickly. This was in November. It's January now. We're going to talk to Chad. We're going to go through City Council, and we're going to make additional recommendations that encourage higher density. At that time, we talked about 55 feet. We talked about 45 feet. And the reason that that's important is because of the 2-to-1. your height and your length of the buildings there's a ratio there. So if the building's only a certain height, it can only be a maximum of a certain length. So in trying to answer the questions that were just asked, the reason we've done this is the whole purpose we came back together as we're doing now was to come up with additional recommendations that would encourage high-density development in the downtown area. So I believe that's correct. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. Anyone else? Oh. If it's quick.
I'm sorry, but I've been to every single one of these meetings, and if I remember correctly, the first west to second west and the first east to second west, those R13 to R4 discussions was a completely separate issue. It wasn't contingent of that vote affecting this vote. And if I'm wrong, I'd be curious to see the meeting minutes, but I believe those were two completely, it wasn't
They were totally
passed.
separate. No,
Okay.
no,
You're right.
I agree with that.
Okay.
No, I don't think anybody would argue with you.
Okay,
with that.
thank you.
Please.
So I have spoken before at a city council meeting too. My name is Mary Christensen, and I live at 366 West, 3100 South, which is far outside the bounds of this area, admittedly, but I do spend a fair amount of time there, and I just wanted to voice my support in particular for the requirement for the parking areas to have false windows or something other than grading when they were discussing it with the slideshow. I heard a gentleman behind me say that the building in the picture looked kind of like a prison, which I would agree with that assessment. And I think it would be nice to have that kind of a requirement for false windows or planters on the parking structures, because I think compared to like State Street in Salt Lake, it's kind of dystopian to walk past all the parking garages and see like cars and grading and stuff. So I just wanted to voice my support for that particular change.
Thank you, Mary. With that, then, we will close the public hearing. Appreciate all of those who participated. Before we have a discussion here, and this is amongst ourselves, I mean, this is a discussion with the council. I had the privilege today of going downtown to the Salt Palace. I know Beth was there. I don't know if we had any others, but Wasatch Choice 2050 was a seminar today that lasted all day long. I think there were lots of sponsors, the University of Utah and many others, the Utah League of Cities and Towns that Beth is the president of. Ben McAdams was one of the featured speakers, as well as the CEO of the Wasatch Front Regional Council, who is Andrew Gruber, and also those from out of state. And I think, I'm not trying to persuade anybody here, I think it's important to know where not only Bountiful is, because we love Bountiful, we care about Bountiful, but Bountiful is going to be part of this growth that's happening. There's no doubt now, with so many people doing statistics and doing analysis, Kim Gardner Institute for Public
Policy.
Public Policy, they have the University of Utah and other corporations and other analysts who look at what's going to happen to all of us, which I think is really interesting, Council. These are a couple of things. That for the next 35 years, we will add 57,000 people along the Wasatch Front every year. That's a city the size of Taylorsville every single year. The one thing that we have along the Wasatch Front is we are compacted, and we feel that. We have the mountains on one side, and we have along the Wasatch Front, we have Utah Lake and the Great Salt Lake. We're kind of pinned. And the growth is going to happen along this corridor. It's interesting to me that the statistics they gave, and these are from the Wasatch, from the Institute, but also from the Wasatch Front Regional Council, is that right now along this corridor, from Provo up to Ogden, we have 75% of people live in single-family dwellings. 75%. 25% of our population live in density, whatever you want to call that density. It might be duplexes, it might be, yes, thanks, Beth. So the goal for those who look at these statistics say that in order for us to be able to meet the demands of the people who are coming, that ratio has to go down to 60-40. That means that number from 25 has to raise 15% more for density. Density's not, I've learned since I've been the mayor that density is a really nasty swear word for a lot of people. We don't like to hear it because we think of maybe low-income housing and crime and a lot of other things, which it doesn't have to be that. But that word density is going to become more and more part of the discussion along the Wasatch Front, and we're not going to be absent from that. We're not. Even though we're almost grown out, how are we going to grow? For the most part, we're going to have to grow up a little bit. We're going to have to grow up. If we want our loved ones to come back and live in Bountiful, like I have 3 of my children live here. I know that some of us have children that live here. There is no way for that to happen unless we have a vision of the future. Because we'll either choose the future that we want to have happen, or it will choose us. And when it chooses us, if it chooses us, it's going to be chaotic. So I really, from this today, it was just passionate in my mind about the need to be visionary. I'm not really trying to answer that this has to happen right now or this or that. This is one other statistic that just absolutely was mind-boggling to me. 15 years from now, there's been several studies here locally at the University of Utah and the Kem Gardner Institute, is that the average home along the Wasatch Front will be $880,000. Just in the last 2 or 3 years, we've added 20,000, I think, Beth, is that what I saw at the last one? Right. Our homes, the average home sale, this is along the Wasatch Front, has gone up $20,000. Well, that's a little scary when you think of our children, and I know I'm thinking, gosh, I hope I live that long and I can sell my house, but I think it's more than that. It's a matter of, where we are. You can see it too, in this legislative session, you will hear the term $17 billion, because that's basically roughly what the state budget is this year, $17 billion with a B, and 4 years ago it was $13 billion. These projects that we're talking about, we're reading in the paper, the Point of the Mountain and the Point of the Mountain, what do they call that now today?
Are you talking about Lehigh?
Yeah, what they're doing there at the Point of the Mountain.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Silicon Slopes and so forth. We're talking billions of dollars just to do that. There is no doubt to me that I love single family dwellings. I'm really proud of this council that we preserved first west to second west, from fourth north to fifth south, to be family dwellings. I'm proud of that. There isn't a connection for the next one, but there's going to be, what we did there, we did for the future of you folks who live in that area. I mean, really, this council, it wasn't me because I don't have a vote on that, this council voted for for you and in behalf of the residents of Bountiful. But there, you just need to know, regardless of what we say today, or if it's delayed a little bit, this pressure to have 40% of our people along the Wasatch Front be in multi-use
Higher density.
and higher density. I think, if I said anything that was out of order here, Beth, you heard it today?
That's correct.
I think it's just important to know, along this corridor, it is going to change dramatically over the next, for us, 6% growth just in South Davis County over the next 6 or 8 years. That's a lot of people right here where we don't have a lot of room. So these kind of decisions aren't going to come up in 20 years. They're not going to come up in 10 years. They're going to be decisions really soon that we all have to make in regards to the playing field that we are on now. So I thought maybe it'd be helpful if you knew what, at least I learned something today. I went and they paid $35 for me to be there, and I thought I should take some notes.
Mayor, I think that was really well said. One of the things I would add, though, is that when we preserved that area for single-family residences, the mayor used the word family dwellings, and I would argue that family dwellings come in all sizes. So I would simply say that the density levels don't necessarily reflect whether it is a family dwelling or not. The challenge I think that we all have is, because we are looking at this perspective from a long-term strategy, and long-term being the 5 to 15-year range, we do have to look at things and say, you know, when I get calls of people who say, I wish my kids could live here, they can't afford it. I can't tell you how many people have said that to me. They might not come to these meetings, but that doesn't mean that they're concerned enough that they want their kids to live here, but there is not an affordability issue, or there is an affordability issue. Right now, the median house price is $300,000. When I was starting out, I couldn't have afforded a $300,000 house. And that's the median. That means that that's the statistical average. And that takes into account all sizes of structures and for residential occupancy. These things that we have to look at in terms of what we can do to manage our growth, in other words, be part of the solution, have to really take into account how can we also accommodate people who want their kids to be here, who want to have some other options. Not all of us can afford to have a house on the hill, and we love those residents just as much as we love the residents that are in these higher density dwellings. They are equally a part of the fabric of our city, and we do need to be able to accommodate them in a fashion that's going to be helpful long term. So I thank you, Mayor. I thought that was a great statement, so just wanted to add that.
Thank you.
Family dwellings and all.
Thanks, Bill. Yes, notwithstanding.
Correct.
Now, it's a good time to have some discussion amongst our council with each other, and I'll leave it to you.
I think it's important to add that we are going to have more density in the city, but it doesn't all have to occur within the historically important and desirable to preserve downtown zone.
I'd like to try to see if we can get a balance, you know, something that's a win-win. I'm really glad that we passed that we wanted to preserve the neighborhood that we did for single family, for single residential. And I think that was great. That was definitely a good thing for us to do. And I think looking at this, I still feel like there might be some win-win, you know, some compromises that we can look at. And I know that it was expressed that you don't want to delay the decision, but I think it's really important to get this right. And so if we don't do it, you know, it's better for us to delay a few weeks or whatever and to get it right than to just make a rushed judgment on this. And so I would like to just hear more options about what we could do that might be a good compromise, or I'd like to hear from the Planning Commission in the future, possibly, but I'd like to hear what the other council members think as well.
Mayor, I'd like to make a comment. I was born and raised in Brigham City, Utah, lived on Main Street. I have a real love for Main Street. My father had the jewelry store on Main Street. We played on Main Street. That is a very important part of Brigham City, and I look at downtown Bountiful as an extremely important part of this city. There's heritage there. There is things, I was sad, I know it had to happen, but we lost Stoker. That was sad. That was sad. We got the Tabernacle downtown, which is a beautiful facility. And as I look at that, and I really feel that we need to maintain that portion of the city. With the way the building is gone, I can understand the need for multiple structures and houses, and I like what's being proposed here. But I do feel we need a little more time. I do. I was very disappointed in the Planning Commission not coming up with a recommendation. I appreciate Chad and the staff and putting together the recommendation from staff. I feel personally that those members of the Planning Commission, we have architects, we have businessmen, we have ladies that have been here quite a while, understand this city. I'd personally like to see them step up and come forward with a recommendation.
Sir John.
I just wanted to mention that, kind of addressing where did the 45 feet come from. It was in response to the original ordinance that we passed. That we passed it, but we had kind of an icky feeling when we did it, and we asked that if we could get together with the Planning Commission and see if we could make it a little more appealing to both bodies. And so we had a joint meeting, and it was brought up 45 feet, and the majority of the council and the majority of the Planning Commission said, hey, we're comfortable with the 45 feet. Now, there's people that were not comfortable with it, but that's where it came from. It came out of that joint meeting that we had with the planning the Planning Commission.
Thank you. So, to me, I mean, I'm happy for any other comments, but
Mr. Mayor, sorry, just really fast. I just want to be maybe provide a little bit of clarification on those work sessions. Of course, no decisions occur in those meetings. They were
correct.
They were just strictly work sessions, and I think you know the outcome of that was taking a standard forward to consider. And we have a public process that we go through anytime we change a zoning standard, a zoning map. Anytime we do that, there's a public process that we go through where we receive public input, and you know that's part of the process. So I definitely don't want to give the impression that that was a foregone conclusion. That what we did at that point was say these are some items we would like to take forward to the public to consider at a public hearing. So this is the process that we're going through, and if the council and commission, after hearing public testimony, decide to do something different than what was discussed at those work sessions, that's completely acceptable. So
I understand what you're saying, Chad, but I was just explaining where
Sure.
we got those
that's
those
definitely
numbers
where those came from, and that's the direction that we you know
it was enough of direction that's what you put in the change document,
right.
correct?
And the direction was to bring this forward to the public process for consideration. So that's what we're doing.
Thanks, Chad. I would just say that it sounds like to me, unless I've misinterpreted, that we sound like maybe we're looking at what Chad recommended, and that was to send it back to the Planning Commission to work through this and to send us a real recommendation. I mean, really, it's the work. That's the reason we have a Planning Commission, if I'm not mistaken. And so if that is the way that you want to go, and I'm not declaring that to be so, then we'd look for a motion to do that and see if everybody's comfortable.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I would make a motion that we remand back to the Planning Commission and have them give us a proposal
Within 30 days.
within the 30-day limit.
Yes, and that 30 days
Is that-
started?
When they first received it.
When they first
Okay,
received.
okay.
So that was last week.
Yeah.
When's their next meeting?
It's February 6th.
Can I just get a clarification too? Are you motioning that you want a proposal? You don't want the same recommendation to come
No.
back? You want
We want a
some
definite
sort of a proposal? Okay.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter if it's the same, just
Correct.
a recommendation.
Just
Okay.
a recommendation.
Because yeah, okay.
So we do have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I didn't say aye.
I know, I'm looking at you.
Aye.
Do you want to give, are you a no vote?
It all depends. Are you going to ask for a no vote?
Well, are there any opposed?
Nay.
So that is a 4-1, and that passes, and we'll send that back to, Chad.
Can I just ask for one other thing?
Sure.
Did you want there to be additional public hearing, or do you just want this to be discussion?
No, I think there needs to be an additional public hearing, yes.
Okay. And just so that the public can know what to expect, are you also going to want additional public hearing at the council meeting as well, when a recommendation is brought forward?
I would like to see that part of the motion.
Do you
Okay.
think that we would need it at that point? It's fine, I just was curious.
I think we need to be as open as we possibly can, because this issue is going to affect Bountiful for 50, 60, 70 years. And I don't think we need to rush into this. And I think we need the input from the citizens and as much clarity and much openness as we can get.
Okay.
I have a question.
Sure.
So we just passed a motion to remand it back to the Planning Commission. We didn't include in that motion the public forum, which I'm not against it, but is it okay the way
Sure.
we've done it?
Yeah,
that
I mean,
we passed
so
it, and then
it-
we
there-
also asked for a public hearing, but it wasn't within the bounds of the motion?
So it wasn't, it's really just direction on how to hold the meeting. There's, the legal requirements for public hearings for this have already been met with with tonight's public hearing and the last public hearing. It's really just a clarification on how the meeting should be run. If you want to revote on it, there's no problem with that.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, can we possibly vote on the issue of having 2 additional public hearings, one at the Planning Commission
Right.
and
So-
one at the City Council?
So really all you need to do is just, you don't need to re-vote on what you already voted
That's
on.
correct.
Just vote on whether or not you want a public hearing
That's
to be
correct.
part of that process.
Okay.
So
I'll
just an
look for a
additional
motion.
Well, it's an amendment, isn't it?
No, it's a separate.
It'd just be a
Yep, separate
separate motion.
I got you.
Okay, I'll look for a motion.
Okay.
Once you voted, you can't.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we hold an additional public hearing at the Planning Commission and an additional public hearing at the City Council in conjunction with putting together a recommendation from the Planning Commission and a decision by the City Council.
Thank you. Second?
I'll second that.
Good. Any further discussions?
Yes.
Please.
I just have to express frustration, and I don't mean to take anyone to task here. I'm not trying to pick a fight with anyone. But why are we going to ask folks to come back 2 more times now, when the only people that are going to show up are the people that are opposed to the idea, and we've already heard from them and we didn't care. The people who are pushing for the height increase aren't going to show up and speak, so why are we going to force folks to come out and speak again? I don't understand that.
I totally agree with what you're saying, but I don't think that it's a good idea to say we don't want to hear from them. So
Oh,
it's,
I wish people would hear from me.
right, right. So I guess I'm just saying that it's the lesser of two evils. I mean, we don't want them to feel obligated to come, but we want them to feel invited to come.
Sure.
Do you want me to remove my motion?
No, heavens no.
And hopefully it may help, just by the words that you've said, Richard, that those who write in the Clipper might be able to help us with that notice. So, did we get a second?
Oh, yes.
We got a second?
Chris Simonson gave a
Okay,
second.
any other further discussion? Thanks, Richard. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you. I know for some of you, it's like, hey, we kicked the can down the street again, but I really agree over here. We need to get this right. So I hope you're all okay. I hope it shows that we're just not going to just do something willy-nilly. It's just too important to our future. Okay? You good? Pass that on to your friends and have them come. Thank you. Now, next item. We'll turn time over to Clint.
Boy, you turn the time over to the attorney and everybody starts walking out?
Oh, yes, they're gone.
You mean you take it personally now?
Hey,
No,
hey,
I
hey,
I walked out
even the police chief was leaving.
I saw that. Duly noted.
Ooh.
Yeah, see.
Duly noted.
It's a mass exodus. Whoopsies.
People are leaving, I'm going with them.
Yeah, there you go.
Chat outside.
Clint.
We have before you a proposal for some amendments to our city personnel policies and procedures manual for the public that is still here that may not have been here for the work session. We had an in-depth discussion about our amendments to our internal policies and procedures. State of Utah allows for city councils to set such policies and procedures by ordinance, or by resolution, I'm sorry.
Move to approve with Scrivener's correction rights to Clint.
Second.
I gotta add one thing, and Councilman Higginson's suggestion of, and also Councilwoman Holbrook's suggestion on the writing portion of the sexual harassment.
So amended.
Still seconded?
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion
And
passes.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to invite anyone who wants to hear the full details of the
Yes.
employee manual
Thank you.
to stay with our attorney after the meeting.
Yes, yes.
He can give
He'd be
those.
glad to go through all 37
excited
pages.
to talk about
Was it
that.
37? It's a lot.
Yeah.
Chad, item number 11.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an extension request for the Carrington 2 apartments that's on the screen behind me. This is the location of the property. They are very close to pulling a building permit. We were asked to write a letter to their financer stating that they were approved in the correct way and discovered at that point that they had expired. We do have the ability to grant a one-time 6-month extension. That'll allow them to get started on the project and still be in compliance with the code. So we are recommending approval of that 6-month extension.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is also good. Mr. Rowland.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, last October you approved the final plat for the Renaissance Town Center, a commercial mixed-use planned unit development, Phase 1, Plat 3. In the meantime, that plat has not been recorded, and Mr. Broadhead, who is making this request, has made some changes to the plat and is requesting a reapproval of the plat in its modified form. The only modification is that the lot that includes the Maverick store now was expanded a little bit to include some common area, which is still included as an easement. The Planning Commission sends this along with a unanimous recommendation for approval with the conditions that are listed. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
So moved?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Boy, Bruce, it's your lucky day. We'll turn some more time over to Mr. Charles.
I was like, who's?
Oh, Bruce
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Come before you tonight to see if we can get approved a DEF diesel exhaust fluid system for our city shops. DEF is required in all the diesel equipment since 2011 for the emission standards. We want to install a pump and tank system that'll hook up to our Fuel Master system so we can bill it out and keep track of it for all of the city departments. We had 3 proposals, one Benecor, Clear Blue system, and the top system. These are all distributed through West Tech Equipment. We went over everything, and the Benecor system is the one that will fill the city's needs, and we recommend that we go with that. Unfortunately, our budget for this was $20,000. It actually came in over the budget, but we can make that up with the other equipment savings that we already realized through this year already. So we recommend that the council approve the purchase of this Benecor DEF system through West Tech for a total of $22,436.40.
Any questions for Charles?
Yeah, are these above-ground tanks?
This is an above-ground tank, yes.
Does it require any ongoing monitoring or government oversight?
Not as long as it's above ground.
Move to approve $22,436.40 as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Charles?
Thanks, Charles.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gary.
Okay.
Nearly harmless. Hey, what a date you've had, Alan.
Yeah.
What a date you had to come to
Sorry,
the
Linda.
city council.
Hi, Linda.
I love that, Linda. Hey, was that a cute date or what? Yeah. Okay.
I promised her it would be really quick.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Whoops.
No, whoops. All right, Alan. Thanks for being here.
Well, Mayor and Council, it's an honor to be here tonight, and I'll make this quick. It's been a long night, and I know you're not done. But what we've got before you is the purchase of some S&C switch cans, and these are cans that we're going to be looking on our system for some of the upgrades. And one was the Carrington Apartments and different lines. They have a fairly long lead time on them. These are projects we've identified in our budget.
It's beautiful.
And we'd look to buy 5 of these.
Looks like dwellings.
This comes with the unanimous recommendation from the Power Commission this morning. We do buy these cans, I'll just point out, we standardize on here so that if we have an accident and a car hits it, as you see in the pictures where the wires come up, if they're the same size and the wires the same, we can unbolt them off and bolt them back on and change them if we need to. Otherwise, we have to change all the wires, which is a long-term process to do that. So we're recommending that we purchase these cans from the low bid from Codell Electric for the total of $100,300. Again, that comes with the Power Commission and staff recommendation.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the purchase of underground 5 cans for the underground switchgear from Codell Electric for a total purchase price of $100,300. As presented by staff.
I'll second that.
Good. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. I'd at least take her to Baskin Robbins on the way home. Thanks. Way
I'm
to
going
go.
to have to do that. Buy her some roses
No,
on
I
the
think you
way
need
home.
an upgrade. Linda, go for the upgrade.
Upgrade?
Don't just settle for ice cream.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, thank you very much.
All right, see you.
Thanks.
Any other items from the council or from staff before we ask for an adjournment? Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I'd be happy to make a motion that we adjourn to a closed session to discuss the acquisition or sale of real property, pending litigation and/or to discuss the character and/or competence of an individual. You guess which.
Second.
Second.
Don't know that should be.
All in favor?
So this is so for Councilmember Simonson's information and a recall back to our recent training, it's a roll call vote. And I've decided to add a little flair in 2018. So we'll start with Councilwoman Holbrook.
Nice.
Aye.
Councilmember Simonson.
Aye.
Councilwoman Harris.
Aye.
Councilmember Higginson.
Aye.
Councilmember Knight.
Aye.
How'd it feel to be last?
I was like, technically I'm here.
All right.
So.
Hey, thanks for everyone being here. You have a good night.